Atmanam. Actually reading Canto 3, Chapter 4, entitled Vidura Approaches Maitreya, and it's text number 35, and it's a really extraordinary text and purport. Okay, so Atmanam Cha Kuru Shrestha Atmanam Chakuru Shrestha Atmanam Chakuru Shrestha Krishnena Manasek Chitam Krishnena Manasek Chitam Krishnena Manasek Chitam Atmanam Chakuru Shrestha Krishnena Manasek Chitam Jayan Gate Bhagavate Jayan Gate Bhagavate Jayan Gate Bhagavate Rurodha Prema Vivala Ruroda Prema Vivala Ruroda Prema Vivala Jayan Gate Bhagavate Rurodha Prema Vivala Atmanam Chakuru Shrestha Krishnena Manasek Chitam Jayam Gate Bhagavate Rurodha Prema Vivala
Atmanam Chakuru Shrestha Krishnena Manasek Chitam Jayan Gate Bhagavate Ruroda Prema Vivala Atmanam Chakuru Shrestha Krishnena Manasek Chitam Jayan Gate Bhagavate Ruroda Prema Vivala
Atmanam Chakuru Shrestha Krishnena Manasek Chitam Jayan Gate Bhagavate Ruroda Prema Vivala
Atmanam Chakuru Shrestha Krishnena Manasek Chitam Jayan Gate Bhagavate Ruroda Prema Vivala
Atmanam himself Cha also Kuru Shrestha O best among the Kurus Krishnena by Krishna Manasa by the mind Ikchitam remembered Jayan thus thinking of Gate having gone Bhagavate of the devotee Ruroda cried loudly Prema Vivala overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love. Translation. Understanding that he was remembered by Lord Krishna while quitting this world, Vidura began to cry loudly, overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love. Responsively, please. Understanding that he was remembered by Lord Krishna while quitting this world, Vidura began to cry loudly, overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love.
Overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love.
So we see here how, I'll read the purport in a moment, it's a short purport, but a really interesting purport. We see here how Vidura, when he hears that Krishna was thinking of him at his last moments on this world, that it was an impetus or udipan that then inspired him to experience ecstatic love. And we understand this because that Krishna was thinking of him, because when Krishna was performing his Moshal Leela, when he's winding up his pastimes in this world, he inspired Maitreya to come there and hear from him. Internally he inspired him. And, even though he was directly speaking with Uddhava, Maitreya was in the bushes nearby. And that is explained by Sridhar Swami, that this was the inspiration of Krishna, that he came there. But then also he instructed Maitreya at some point during that conversation that he should go and impart this same knowledge to Vidura. And when Vidura found that out, because Uddhava had told him, when Vidura found that out, that was a stimulus to, because already there's so much love in his heart for Krishna, but that stimulus just caused that love to just come out and erupt. It was not just like it sort of slowly leaks out, but it just like erupts out of the body. And he was just overwhelmed. And we see earlier on in this same chapter, a similar thing was happening with Uddhava. That he was just remembering Krishna. And that was the stimulus. Because these ecstatic manifestations, they have stimulus. And this is what's happening here. He's being stimulated by this remembrance. And therefore, we see that this love is just bursting out. And what happens with great devotees is when this love erupts, it becomes uncontrollable. They actually can't control themselves. Like sometimes you might be feeling a little bit emotional towards something or someone, and you keep emotions in check because you think, well, it's not so kind of cool or auspicious or whatever to be. It's just like when Krishna was leaving for Dwarka, when he was leaving Hastinapur after the battle of Kurukshetra, and he stayed in Hastinapur with the Pandavas for quite some time afterwards, months. Actually, I think it was years. And it'd been so long since he'd been home to Dwarka, he was starting to feel that, well, I have to go back. And also he was preparing for winding up his earthly pastimes, but he had to go back to Dwarka, and when the queens found out that Krishna was leaving, they all became very, very emotional, which is kind of natural. It's like the object of everyone's love and affection, the supreme object of their love and affection is leaving their vision. And therefore they become very, very emotional. But Yudhisthira, he said, no, don't cry, this is very inauspicious. And they were able to some extent to keep their emotion in check. So this helps us also to understand the depth of their love in comparison to other devotees. You'll see, when devotees are more absorbed in love of Krishna, they can't check their emotions overcome them. And this is how we understand their degree of love. You see, like with someone like Arjuna, he was able to channel his emotions to do the service to Krishna. Still, he had prem. There's no doubt that he had prem, but his prem was not necessarily as elevated as someone like Uddhava or Mother Yasoda or the gopis. We see the gopis when they became overcome by prem, they just couldn't control it. They just erupted out in such a way that they just lost control. And this is not a sign of, in the spiritual level, this is not a sign of weakness, this is a sign of greatness. This is a sign of their advancement in Krishna consciousness. Their love for Krishna is so great that they can't keep their emotions in check. But we find, because we're not so advanced in Krishna consciousness, like we might, in Kirtan, for instance, the Kirtan on Wednesday night, was it Wednesday night? Or Tuesday night when we had the flower abhishek. That was just a really ecstatic kirtan. And no doubt some of you were experiencing emotions during the kirtan. The feelings were quite strong. But did you start to burst out in tears and just collapse on the floor and start to roll around? You had horripilations, and did anyone experience that? So we're able to keep these emotions in check, so it indicates to us that we're not as advanced as we'd like to be. But we see when Lord Chaitanya, who is manifesting this Mahabhav, which is the highest manifestation of love of Krishna, when he was experiencing ecstatic symptoms, just like there's a story when he went to Vrindavan, and then he was coming back along the bank of the river, and he kept having these ecstatic symptoms. So his servant Ballabha Bhattacharya had to take him away from the river because he just kept going into these ecstatic swoons all the time, because the stimulus was there. And this is the point here. It's like the stimulus is there. Vidura his love is being stimulated by some external thing. And let me see, I've just moved on my notes a bit. It's just, maybe I should read the purport a bit, and then my notes didn't come through. Oh, that's a drag. Yeah, I'll try my best. Vidura, this is Prabhupada's purport. Vidura was overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love when he understood that Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, thought of him at the last moment. Although he thought of himself as insignificant, he was remembered by the Lord by his causeless mercy. So this is the stimulus, is the causeless mercy. If we look in the Nectar of Devotion, it helps us to understand all this a little bit better. Let me just bear with me a sec. Sorry. As is often the case with technology, at least for me, I find it doesn't always cooperate with me, and it just does its own thing. And even though sometimes it's pretty amazing what they can do, sometimes it's pretty frustrating what they don't do. Hare Krishna, I'll find it. Sorry about this. Documents. I studied on this quite a bit last night just to try and understand what was happening for him, because it's not a topic that an uneducated person like myself can easily comment on. So it's better to seek guidance from our acharyas. And actually this is the case with all these discussions. It's really important to understand these things through the teachings of our acharyas. That's the only way we can actually understand any of this. Alright, so here we go. 35. Okay. Nope, not there either. Okay. For some reason it hasn't updated. Okay, so I'll read this again. Vidura was overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love when he understood that Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, thought of him at the last moment. Although he thought of himself as insignificant, he was remembered by the Lord by his causeless mercy. So if we look in chapter 21 and 22 of the Nectar of Devotion, this 64 qualities of Krishna. So you'll see there that it describes these 64 qualities of Krishna. Now, one of these qualities of Krishna, I think it's probably about number 23 or 24 or something like that, is magnanimous. And that's what's coming out here, is Krishna's magnanimous nature towards his devotee. And this is, because if you go up a few chapters later, I think it's 26, 27, 28, the first one is stimulus for ecstatic love, then the next one is symptoms of ecstatic love, and the next one is existential ecstatic love. Right? So in the symptoms of ecstatic love, it talks about the different types of things, the stimulation for ecstatic love. It talks about the different types of things that can stimulate one's manifesting ecstatic love, because there's always a stimulus there. And it can be things like Krishna's beautiful bodily features, or it could be things like Krishna's wonderful activities, Krishna's beautiful smile, his ankle bells, his flute, and so many external paraphernalia, all different types of stuff it describes, Now, Rupa Goswami goes on to describe when this stimulus is external, when it's not like, I'll give you an example. You can look at it in two ways, and Prabhupada goes on to say that actually there's very little. He says actually these stimuluses are the same, but for purpose of classification they're given different names, just so we can understand. But when we can say Krishna has a beautiful body, this is external. The body is considered from an external point of view. But when we talk about Krishna's beautiful bodily features, it's him. It's a subtle thing, but it's a slight difference. So when it's Krishna directly, it's called an alambana. Yeah? But when it's Krishna external to Krishna, like say for instance his ankle bells, even though we understand that spiritually it's all absolute and it is ultimately Krishna, but when you say for instance his ankle bells is what they call an udipana, meaning it's external stimulus. But both of them are stimuluses. So that chapter goes when it talks about this stimulation, it mostly focuses on Krishna's beautiful form, and it talks about his different ages. His what's the first one? Does anyone remember the first age? Kormara. Yeah, and what is that? What age group is that? Yeah, so basically from 0 to 5. So it describes the beautiful bodily features of Krishna at that age, and how he's kind of like, like little children, you get them, they're kind of all like plump. Not fat, but they've just got a little bit of extra, their hands are sort of plump and their arms are plump and that. And it just describes how beautiful his form is. And just his eyes, because he's got kajal under his eyes. And, so the chapter goes on and describes all about how beautiful he is at that age and how this serves as a stimulus for the gopis, the elder gopis, because they're caring for Krishna at his age and they just think he's the most adorable child. And he's so adorable that he does these mischievous activities. He and Balaram, these different activities, and it's really inspiring. The devotees, rather than getting the gopis, rather than getting angry, their love just increases. And Mother Yasoda the same. When she sees Krishna is growing his teeth, then he's breastfeeding, and he bites on her breast, but she's not disturbed by that. She'd rather it increases her love. It's a stimulus for her increase of love. And then what's the next stage? Poganda, and that is from 5 to 10. Of course, these ages are not like it's exactly this point to exactly this point. There's a little bit of flexibility, and we see the acharyas describe them differently sometimes. But in this age, he's growing up. He's becoming a boy. Yeah? And this is when he starts, I was saying before, mischievous activities. This is when he starts the mischievous activities. And, when they're stealing the butter and sometimes when Krishna can't steal the butter, because it's too high up on the roof, or they've made some arrangement where he can't get it. What does he do? He goes in and pinches the babies, he wakes them up and he urinates on the floor and runs away. And the residents of Vrindavan, the gopis, rather than becoming angry, they just think, oh, he's so beautiful. And they actually develop this desire to want to have Krishna as their child. But Krishna, being the fulfiller of all desires for his devotees, he makes that arrangement. So that what happens is later on we see that when Brahma stole the calves and the cowherd boys, what happened? Krishna expanded himself as all the calves and the cowherd boys, because also all the cows wanted to have Krishna as their child as well. Such is their love for Krishna. We want to have him as our child. And so he expands himself as all the cowherd boys and all the calves. So during that period, for 1 year, they can all have Krishna as their child. It's just amazing the reciprocation that goes on between the devotees and the Lord. And of course, in Vrindavan, it's easy to see how this is happening. Because their love is so externally manifest. Their love is so full and so, in many cases, uncontrollable that it comes out. And Krishna reciprocates that with that in a very visible way. But we need to understand that this reciprocation is also going on for us. It may not be in such an overt manifestation of this reciprocation, and you may have to sometimes reflect on things that are happening in your life to see how Krishna is reciprocating with you. It's not like he's going to, it's not like he's, or maybe it is, it's not for me at least, I can talk about for me. Maybe he is coming off the altar and dancing with you in the kirtan. Maybe he is talking to you, I don't know, but I can tell you he's not doing it for me. Yeah? And there's a nice lecture where Prabhupada, when he installed the deities in Los Angeles, the brass deities, they're like about this tall, and at the end of the lecture, he was talking about the appropriate mood of worship and developing humility. And he said, and one day that Krishna, he will talk to you. One day that Krishna, he will dance with you. So it happens, and it has happened. There was it Gauridas Pandit and his disciple, what was his name before it was Hriday Chaitanya? Does anyone know? Was it Dukhi Krishna? I'm not sure. I can't remember. I don't want to speculate. Hriday Chaitanya, Nishingananda, maybe. Anyway, I can't remember. But anyhow, so what happened was that the disciple had organized this festival. I think it might have been Gaurpani festival or something like that. And he had spent all the Guru's money organising this festival. And Gauridas Pandit got a bit upset. But he said, but Guru Maharaj, I'm just doing it for your pleasure. Which was true, because he was completely pure in his motivation. And then it came, Gauridas Pandit was upset. And he came back to take darshan of the deities, and he saw the deities weren't there. And he's like, what's going on here? And then so he went down to the festival and he saw the deities were dancing in the festival and everyone could see it. The deities were dancing. And Gauridas became very angry and he picked up a stick and he went to chase deities. And the deities started to run away from him and they ran and they went straight into Hriday Chaitanya's heart and just disappeared into his heart. The deities came back. But so it just goes to show how the Lord, he's not limited by the form and he can directly interact with us and reciprocate with us in the most amazing of ways. We're seeing here this in this purport how out of his compassion, out of his causeless mercy, that Krishna was thinking of Vidura at his last moment, and this was the stimulus for Vidura's love to awaken, to erupt. It wasn't sleeping; it was inside already. He had great love for Krishna. We see there's another pastime when Krishna was visiting Hastinapur. And I've heard this put together in different ways, but I don't think these pastimes are directly connected. But at one point, when Krishna was visiting Hastinapur, Duryodhana was trying to entice him. He was trying to, because he knew he was very powerful. He knew he had lots of soldiers and things like that, and he wanted the soldiers on his side. It wasn't so interesting, Krishna. But then he invited Krishna to come to his palace, and he wanted to feed him a big feast, to placate him, to kind of, the way the man's heart is through his stomach. So he wanted to entice Krishna to come on his side, but Krishna wouldn't even look at the feast. He didn't even give Duryodhana the pleasure of looking at what he'd prepared, but rather he went and he visited Vidura. And then Vidura again, because Krishna's there. So one of the things that is a stimulus, actually the very first stimulus, is the beautiful bodily features of the Lord. So the Lord has so many, his body is just extraordinarily beautiful. And so when Krishna arrived at Vidura's house, Vidura was so overwhelmed in ecstasy, and he wanted to feed Krishna. And so we know the story. What did he do? He ran and got some bananas. But his ecstasy was so overwhelming that he just couldn't put it together. And he's peeling the bananas, he's throwing away the bananas and giving Krishna the skin. And what was Krishna doing? Oh, no, Vidura, I'm not going to eat that. That's the skin of a banana. No one eats the skin of the banana. No, he ate the skins. That was his reciprocation of love with Vidura. And for him it was relishable. And this is the nature of Krishna. He can reciprocate in any way based on your mood of love to him. Another wonderful example we see in the first canto of the Bhagavatam is when Bhishma, when he's lying on his deathbed, I think it's like chapter 9 in the first canto, then he's reflecting on the exchange between Krishna and himself on the battlefield. And so he's shooting arrows at Krishna. I mean, if I started to shoot arrows at you, how would you feel? This guy's not my friend. Yeah? He's trying to kill me. But this is not, Krishna's not thinking like that. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that when Bhishma was shooting these arrows, because he's in the chivalrous ras, he was experiencing prema. There's no doubt about that. He's a very, very elevated devotee. He's shooting arrows at Krishna because he understood this was the exchange. This was his service to Krishna. Right? Krishna's experiencing those arrows when they're cutting his body. He was experiencing them just like these love bites. When the lover will bite her beloved on the neck and make this red mark. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes it that this was how Krishna was accepting these arrows. It was like the lover's bite on the neck. And rather than being distressful for him, it was very pleasing for him. So even though there's this rust going on, this chivalrous rust, where Bhishma externally is trying to kill Krishna or trying to inflict wounds upon him, Krishna saw these arrows like offerings of flowers, and he saw the wounds on his body like love bites, and for him it was very, very pleasing. And so then what he does is Bhishma's fight. I mean, Bhishma was an extraordinary warrior. Bhishma's fighting more and more vigorously, trying to kill Arjuna, because he told Duryodhana, I'll destroy the Pandavas, at least I'll kill Arjuna. And Krishna, he had made a promise he wouldn't take up weapons. But because Bhishma was fighting so vigorously, and Arjuna was going to get defeated. Because Bhishma was the mightiest warrior on the battlefield. Even though he was the grandfather, and even though he was very old, he was still a better warrior than any of them. And probably a better warrior than most of them put together. But, so he was fighting very vigorously, and it looked like Arjuna was going to get defeated. So Krishna got down off his chariot, and he picked up a chariot wheel, and he ran at Bhishma holding this chariot wheel like his chakra to cut off his head. And Bhishma's just like, later on, he's just reflecting on this, and he's seeing this in his mind while he's lying on this bed of arrows, his deathbed of arrows. He's seeing this vision of Krishna. And I've never really got the significance of this. But he's running at Bhishma, right, and he drops his wrapper on the field. And for Bhishma, this was such a significant thing that, he just I'm guessing it's just because Krishna had just become oblivious to all, the external things in this exchange of love with him, that he just didn't worry about his wrapper. And maybe it's because, the upper body's meant to be covered. I'm not really sure. And I haven't read the Acharyas offer any comment. But for Bhishma, this was a very significant thing, that he dropped his wrapper, his chadar. But the point there that I'm trying to explain is this exchange of love. It can manifest in so many different ways. It's not just like boy-girl kind of thing, but it can manifest in so many ways based on the relationship, based on the rasa the devotee is experiencing with Krishna. And as we see, it's described in Brihat Bhagavatamrita, whatever the rasa is that you have with the Lord, he will reciprocate equally in that rasa. He will reciprocate in the same way. So if you have a chivalrous relationship, he will reciprocate in a chivalrous relationship, and it's the exchange of the greatest love. It's not like a hatred, I'm going to kill you kind of exchange. It's the exchange of the greatest love. And we see here Vidura, he had a different type of relationship, and his relationship again was the exchange of the greatest love. And we see, Mother Yasoda, Nanda Maharaj, all the residents of Vrindavan, and ultimately the gopis and then Radharani. Their exchange was unique. And Krishna reciprocated fully in that exchange. So it's the same way for us. When we're here, we're dancing in kirtan, we're chanting our rounds, we're doing a service, whatever. Krishna's reciprocating with us. He says this, in the Gita, Yeyata mam parpadyante tangstatai bhajam. As they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. So according to the way that we surrender to Krishna, according to our capacity to surrender to Krishna, he'll reciprocate. So the more we're able to surrender to Krishna, the more he's able to reciprocate. And I was reading something very interesting last night, that how it's described in the 21st and the 22nd chapter of the Nectar of Devotion, the 64 qualities of Krishna. And it says that jivas can possess up to 50. Then Shiva, he possesses 5 more. Then, I don't remember the qualities, so please don't ask me. I don't remember what it was, like 64 qualities. Then Narayan, he possesses another 5. Yeah? And then finally there's 4 that only Krishna possesses. Yeah? But interestingly enough, Rupa Goswami explains that for the perfected devotees, they actually possess these 55. They possess the same qualities that Lord Shiva also possessed, because he is, after all, he's Vaishnavana Mita Shambhu. He's the greatest of Vaishnavas. So these great Vaishnavas, they possess all the 55 qualities, but also they possess the different cities, the mystic cities, which are described as being things that Krishna possesses. I would say he probably does, but they're not listed there amongst the 64 qualities. So it's quite extraordinary the way that Krishna reciprocates with his devotees. But then we can see here, I'll just read the last point. Vidura accepted this as a great favor, and thus he cried. And it mentions here in the verse how he was Rurodha, he cried loudly. So from as far as I can figure out, there's 2 things manifesting. He's crying, but he's tears are coming, tears are just flowing out of his eyes, but he's also crying out very loudly. So there's different types of manifestations. It doesn't describe other manifestations, but there may have also been other manifestations in his body of his ecstatic symptoms. And these last 2 sentences to me are just the most amazing statement by Srila Prabhupada. This crying is the last word in the progressive path of devotional service. It's an extraordinary statement. It's the last word. It's the last, if you can cry for Krishna, that is perfection. But not this like crocodile tears just putting on, like sometimes, I don't know if you see it here, but especially in India, you'll see you get these sahajas, they come to the temple and they'll roll around on the floor and they'll cry and things like that. And one time, one he said to Prabhupada that someone came to the temple and they were doing this and that and they were crying and this thing, and they thought it was a manifestation of great ecstasy. And Prabhupada said, you should have kicked them in the head. Yeah. Because then you would have seen, if you had kicked him in the head, he would have got angry with you. And you would have seen that actually this is just false. Because people do tend to manifest these ecstatic symptoms when they don't understand the devotional process very deeply, because they think it will bring them followers. They think it will bring them attention, money, whatever. They're just doing it for notoriety. It's not like, but Vidura certainly wasn't doing this to bring attention to himself. He was doing it because he couldn't control it. It was just erupting out of him because of his love. So Prabhupada says, this crying is the last word in the progressive path of devotional service. This is a perfection, to be able to cry for Krishna. One who can cry for the Lord in love is certainly successful in the line of devotional service. So Prabhupada's defining that. It's not just like, the crocodile tears sort of thing. No, we cry for Krishna in love, genuine, deep love. This is what they call an anubhav. Yeah? Anubhav, it's something, it's a symptom, it's an external manifestation that comes driven by emotion. When one's becoming emotionally overwhelmed by the exchange of, with Krishna, by the stimulus, this udipan or alambana, which comes from Krishna or his activities or whatever, because his pastimes also can serve as stimulus, then this causes the love, because it's not like all of a sudden bang you love Krishna, No, it's already there in the heart. And this point is also made by Mahaprabhu, that this Nitya Siddha Krishna Prem Sadhakavanai Shavana Kara Uday. Uday means it awakens. It comes out of the heart. Karai means does, so it comes out of the heart through the stimulus of the process of bhakti. And so, but we see that with Vidura, with Uddhava, with these great souls, this love is already very, very manifest. It's already manifesting in different ways. And we even see with Prabhupada, sometimes, his love was very deep, and sometimes generally he was very good at keeping it in check because his young disciples wouldn't understand. But sometimes he became overwhelmed. There's descriptions how tears would come. It's not just like, tears would just dribble. No, tears would squirt out of his eyes, and they just like shoot. And I remember meeting a devotee some years ago, and I can't remember who it was. But they told me that they were sitting in front of Prabhupada when he was discussing something or something, the question was being asked. And the tears just squirted out of his eyes, and they actually landed on this devotee, who was several feet away from Prabhupada. I mean, that's not normal. Have you ever had that experience where tears just like squirt like a syringe out of your eyes? That's not normal. That's an ecstatic manifestation. That's an anubhav, where the person is manifesting this type of symptom due to the stimulus of, in Prabhupada's case it was probably Krishna's pastimes. But as I was saying in chapter 26, it describes all these different types of stimulus, but the chapter focuses mostly on the form of the Lord and goes through describing these three different stages. And the final one is the Kaishori Leela. It describes the Kaishori Leela. And Jiva Goswami describes, because all the what are the other two? The activities, verbal and mental. That's right. There's the body, there's verbal, there's mental. These are the three ways the qualities are broken down. So the verbal and the mental are described in chapter 21 and 22 when describing the 64 qualities of Krishna. So later on he doesn't go into much sense. But if you go back and read these, you can see how all these different qualities of Krishna can like his very pleasing words. Krishna speaks very pleasing words. Or Krishna might be very magnanimous or very grateful or perform wonderful activities, or he acts only according to Vedic literatures. And I can only remember a few of them. His beauty, his flute playing, his loving pastimes with his devotees, his beautiful threefold bending form. These things all can serve as stimulus, and sometimes some of them or all of them can serve as stimuluses. And we see devotees just respond in different ways, but they become, generally speaking, advanced devotees. They'll become very, very overwhelmed by this stimulus, as we see in this beautiful pastime. And this is the second last verse in this chapter, and then we'll see in the next chapter it goes on to another dialogue. Like these four chapters here, this is the dialogue between Uddhava and Vidura. And we see in this how both Uddhava and Vidura, because they're very, very advanced devotees, extremely advanced devotees. Uddhava is considered to be the best of the Yadus. Like Arjuna was the best of the Kauravas, and then so Uddhava is considered to be the best of the Yadus. And he was such an advanced devotee that he had a body that looked practically the same as Krishna. And when he went to Vrindavan as a messenger for Krishna, the residents of Vrindavan thought he was Krishna because he looked so much like Krishna. So he's achieved that perfection where he looks so much like Krishna. And Krishna, we see earlier on in this section how Krishna considered that Uddhava was as good as himself, and he sent Uddhava as his messenger to Badrikashram to relay his message to Narayana Rishi. So very, very elevated devotees, and Vidura was also very, very elevated, so that we can see how they're experiencing when they're getting these various stimulus from Krishna's activities, that their ecstatic emotions are just overwhelming their external consciousness. And they, we see with Uddhava he couldn't speak, with Vidura he starts to cry out very loudly. So really, really interesting section of the Bhagavatam. Really interesting pastime. Of course, Prabhupada's descriptions here are just beautiful. They're just very, very nicely done. Okay, I think we can finish there. I'm not really sure. Okay. Any questions, comments, corrections? Yes, Sriman Narsimha Prabhu.
When you're speaking about how you are adopting Krishna with non-Jews, and that Krishna reciprocates anyone perfectly, can a jiva come to the platform and reciprocate?
Not to the level of Krishna. Not to the level of Krishna. We can possess, I can't remember there's percentages that are given, but you can possess a certain percentage of those qualities, but only Krishna possesses them in full. And this is why he's known as Bhagavan, is because he possesses the qualities in full. And even we see with the different incarnations, just like I've been working through the Laghu Bhagavatamrita lately, trying to understand. It's a pretty interesting book. I'm trying to understand a little bit about the different various types of incarnations and and Vaibhav and all this type of stuff, Prabhav, and all a bit confusing for me. But one of the things that's described in the 5th chapter of the 1st section, it talks about Swayam Bhagavan, or the Swayam Rupa, but then it goes on to explain what they call the I'm blank on it. Yeah, there's a certain category of this is why I'll never be good at presenting these things, because I just forget, just like that I forget. Paratattva, I think it's called, and it describes how there's 3 deities the three forms of Krishna that fit into this category. There's Nrsimhadev, there's Ramachandra, and there's Krishna, who's Swayam Bhagavan himself. And a really interesting story is, like, if you look at the pastime of Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, right? They took several births. First one they killed by Nrsimhadev, then by Ram, then by Krishna. But the question is there often is, well, why when they were killed by Nrsimhadev, because he's Swayam Bhagavan himself, why didn't they achieve liberation? Why did they only achieve liberation from Krishna? Because only Krishna gives liberation. So generally the other incarnations don't. And we see that there's like Nrsimhadev, that form is very much the Aishvarya form. Even though it's the same personality, very much Aishvarya. Ramachandra is a bit more Madhurya, a bit sweeter. And Krishna is just full of sweetness, and he's Swayam Bhagavan, full power. Even though it's described in Nrsimhadev, Ramachandra, they possess all the qualities in full. When you're talking transcendental, there's full, more full, and most full. Even though you say it's fully possessing the powers, it's just like Anyway, there's just another way. I can't remember. But so even though they're described to possess the qualities in full, it's not the same that Nrsimhadev has the same as Krishna. Krishna is even more complete, even though Nrsimhadev and Ramachandra also are considered to be complete. Krishna is most complete. And therefore when he kills the demons, for instance, by his hand, because we see that, like, when Nrsimhadev killed Hiranyakashipu, he became purified of that. But he thought that Nrsimhadev was just a great person like him. And then when he came back in the next birth, he just thought that Ramachandra was just a great man. Even though his wife Mandodari was telling him, no, this is the Supreme Personality of God. And he said, yeah, in theory I accept that, but I find it just a little bit hard to digest. But then when he came as Shishupal in his final birth, and he was constantly chanting, we were talking about this the other day, right? He was constantly chanting Krishna's name. He was constantly remembering Krishna's form, so he became purified. So that at the end, he achieved prem. When he was killed, when Krishna was cutting off his head, at that point he realized that this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all of his offenses, all his sins were destroyed. And then he cut off his head and he achieved prem. And it's described how temporarily he merged into the form of Krishna, but then he went back and achieved his form in the spiritual world, as what he was, Jaya. So Krishna can do that, but only Krishna can do that. We can't do that. The jiva, as I mentioned, can possess, the perfected devotees, not just the jiva, perfected devotee. You have to achieve this perfection in devotional service, can possess 55 of the qualities. And this is the point that Rupa Goswami is making in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. What percentage, I don't know, but it's not in full. Only Krishna possesses these things in full. And the other incarnations will possess lesser degrees. So if the other incarnations don't possess them in full, then how could we possess them in full? Because we're only jivas. Does that answer your question? It was pretty extraordinary topics, actually, when you understand how Krishna manifests all these different qualities and how he reciprocates with his devotees through these qualities. And it's kind of a little bit beyond our mortal. There's some trace of ink in there. But if the glass was empty and clean, and you could pour milk, it'd be straight away. But and you'd only have to use one glass worth of milk. But the other way, you have to expend hundreds of glasses of milk. And that's what it's like for us, because we come here with so many deep-rooted impurities. They go deep, deep, deep into the heart. Not just the physical organ, but the subtle organ of the heart. They go deeply into the heart. So it's going to require a great deal of purification, a great deal of sacrifice, surrender, and letting go of our conditionings, of our attachments, till we get to the point of this Kadarayudaya, of how it awakens in the heart. It's there. There's Krishna, Mahaprabhu says, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema. It's there in the heart. It's not like it's coming from some other source. It's there in our heart, but we need to awaken it through the process of bhakti. And the more vigorous you can apply yourself to the process of bhakti, the more rapid that will awake. But at least I can talk in my case. I like to hang on to things. I struggle with letting go of things, and therefore it's taking a long time for it to awaken. But others, we see, they advance very quickly. And so, got to let go. Yes, Prabhu.
You mentioned that devotees can process up to 55 qualities, and Krishna has 4 extra qualities, like 64 qualities, and one of them is Rupa Madhuri, which means he has the most attractive form. But is it correct to say that Uddhava also, when he was intense in love, he was also saying bodily features of Krishna to a certain extent?
Yes, same bodily features, but if you look in the 64 qualities, the first quality is Krishna has extraordinary bodily features. Yeah? Just beautiful bodily features. But then later on we see that his form is even more beautiful. It's just like, if you can imagine the most beautiful person in the world, most beautiful woman in the world, right? What she looks like. Like people just men will just fall over themselves trying, and you see this, sometimes men act like such fools when they see a beautiful woman. But her beauty is just insignificant. It's nothing in comparison to the tip of Krishna's finger, even. We can't, because of our material conditioning, we when we think of beautiful, we think of these mundane, ugly bodies, which they are. And I'm talking intellectually here because I don't really have that experience. When we try to conceive of Krishna's beauty, we try to see it in the sense, but these are only like mundane comparisons. They can't actually. It's like holding, like the analogy is given there. It's like, to understand the power of Krishna, it's like trying to hold a candle to the sun. When you hold a candle up to the sun, what is it in comparison to the sun? It's nothing. It's seriously nothing. So trying to understand Krishna's beauty through some mundane comparison, it's just, you can't do it, because it's meaningless. It's a meaningless comparison. Like a drop of water compared to the whole Pacific Ocean. It's meaningless. How can you measure it? So Krishna's beauty, and see, the thing is, if you look at anything in this world, right? You take a beautiful person in this world, right? They're undergoing the same 6 changes. They're born, they grow, they maintain, they dwindle, they vanish. Byproducts dwindle, vanish, right? So at any point you look at someone who's, say, at their peak of their beauty, right? They have an expression here in Australia, it doesn't get any better than this. That's a fact, it doesn't. It's all downhill. So even though you may have the most beautiful form in the world and it's at its peak of beauty, guess what? It's all downhill. But Krishna's beauty is the exact opposite. It's always increasing. He's always getting more and more. You think he's very beautiful now. Wait till you see him in a minute. He's even more beautiful. And you'll find that the more our love for Krishna awakens, the more beautiful we'll find Gopinath. And and Radharani, they'll just become more and more beautiful for you every day as you're growing in devotional service. So you can't really compare. Even Uddhava is very beautiful, but he's still a jiva. You can't compare to Krishna. Nothing you can compare to Krishna. There's nothing you know of except Krishna. That's the only thing you can compare to Krishna, is another form of Krishna. And even that, we see Krishna. This is described in the fifth chapter of the Adi Leela, how Krishna, he expands himself in so many different ways, so many different forms. Balaram, who then expands in the Chatavyuha, and expands the second Chatavyuha, and expands into so many different Leela avatars, and Yuga avatars, and Guna avatars, and etc., etc., etc. Manvantara avatars. So many ways they expand. But there's a nice verse there. It says, Ekala Ishvara Krishna Asabhyabrita. That Krishna, he's the only master. He's the only controller. And all others dance as he makes them do so. This also means that all the other incarnations of Krishna, they serve Krishna. Balaram, he's known as the Supreme Personality of Servant of Godhead. The first expansion from Krishna, his business is serving Krishna. So even all the other expansions of Krishna, they're not as powerful as Krishna. They may be close, but they're not as powerful. He's something unique. Sorry, Saint Prabhu.
Thank you, wonderful class. Questions regarding how you mentioned how Arjuna also had praying for Krishna, but then the gopis' love for Krishna was much more intense.
Yeah.
So from our perspective, we make the distinction of the each devotee's love for Krishna is greater and intense. Like when we go to the rasas and it's more intense than rasa, for example. But for the devotees that are in that particular rasa, how do they feel? Because, say, if I heard that, if I put myself in Arjuna's position and heard someone else's love for Krishna is more stronger than mine, I'd feel like then let's use my rasa for Krishna, then we go for that rasa.
But that's because you have material perception of things. They feel satisfied. There's no question of just like because we're coming from this material perspective, we view everything. It's just like, it's like we've got these filters on our eyes. I mentioned this the other day when I was a child living in Melbourne. There was a plumber who became a famous singer in Australia, and he sung this song called Rose-Colored Glasses. And like if you look at it, it's like if you put rose-colored glasses on, everything looks rosy. So because it's just like, okay, I'll give you another example. Filter. If you put the filter of a dog's body on, right, and you look at the world, what do? You run around sniffing backsides, peeing on poles. That's because that's what you see. You see everything is for that purpose. The poles are for peeing on, backsides are for sniffing. It's just weird. For us, that's really strange, but that's how they see it, and they're satisfied doing that. There's a really interesting verse in the third canto. I don't remember the Sanskrit, but basically it's saying that the living entity is not averse to any situation he finds himself in. Never averse to being in that situation, and he finds a particular type of satisfaction in that. So whether you're born in a worm, you're a worm in stool, you're a dog, or you're a demigod, you're satisfied. And it goes on to describe the pastime of when Indra became a pig. So he took on a pig's body, and he was completely satisfied. When Brahma comes down and says, hey, look, the things are going really bad in the heavenly planets, you've got to come back. He says, what's heavenly planets? Can't you see here? I've got the most wonderful lifestyle here. Look at my beautiful wife, my lovely children. He's just telling Brahma, it doesn't get any better than this. And then Brahma killed his children and he was shocked. He killed his wife, and then he manifested back in his body as Indra, and he took him back. So it's like, because this Atmavan Manyate Jagat, as I see the world, that's how it is. You see everything through your filter. So when you're looking at the pastimes where Krishna's having these wonderful pastimes with his devotees like Arjuna, Bhishma, etc., etc. We're seeing it from our perspective as materially conditioned living entities. But that's not how they're seeing it. Arjuna is completely satisfied with his relationship with Krishna because Krishna is reciprocating fully with that exchange. How Arjuna sees it. He sees Krishna as his friend. So who could be a better friend than Krishna? Bhishma is seeing, Krishna as a rival on the battlefield. Who could be a better rival than Krishna? Mother Yasoda is seeing Krishna as her son. Who could be a better son than Krishna? So you can see, because they have the best possible son or the best rival or the best friend, they're satisfied. And Krishna understands every nuance of their emotion. Because as I was saying in the Brihat Bhagavatamrita, it explains that Krishna has a unique feature, a unique quality for every living being. So when you start to reciprocate with Krishna, you're fully satisfied. You don't want anything else. The only thing that you're not satisfied with is you want to serve him more and more and more. That's ever increasing. And also we see, it's described that the residents of Vrindavan, especially the gopis, when they have jealousy, but it's a transcendental jealousy. And when they see that someone is serving Krishna really nicely, that's pleasing to them. But see, in this world, when you see someone's doing something better than you, how do you feel? You want to pull them down. You want to say bad things about them. You want to, so it's a very different, because of our conditioning, because of the way we view the world, and we think the world is as we view it. This causes us to view these things incorrectly. But if we develop this transcendental vision, then we'll see things very differently. It's a little bit hard to see things in the proper perspective in our conditioned state, because we just don't see it. Pashanapi na pashyati. Even though seeing, you do not see. It can be right there in front of your face. Just like, I look at all of you. What do I see? I see material bodies. But the jiva is there. The pure spirit soul is there in the region of the heart. I don't see it. Because of the conditioning. So as long as you have the conditioning, you're going to see it like that. But they don't have that conditioning, therefore they don't see it like that. And they're satisfied in their relationship. And it's very rare that someone will change their relationship. It can happen, but it doesn't. Because they're satisfied. And that's one of my understanding of one of the dominant features of the spiritual world is everyone's satisfied. But the dominant feature of this material world is everyone's dissatisfied. They want more, they want this, they want that. They're just never satisfied in this world. Yes, Prabhu.
It's just fascinating that here we are in the material condition of life, that we're able to perceive all of these different rasas. We see the devotees of particular rasa. Do they actually see the other type of rasa?
Definitely. Definitely. And this really answers your question from the previous one also, is you read Bhishma's prayers on his deathbed, right? He's talking about the relationship of the gopis with Krishna, and he's understanding this is the highest relationship.